a supposedly bi-weekly look at what's going on in the world of C++, chatting with guests from the community. But you know the format by now. John has a disclaimer to read.
Oh, format. I got that. Disclaimer. Under Washington law, an equine sponsor or professional shall not be liable for an injury to or death of a participant in equine activities resulting from the inherent risk of equine activities. So thank you very much for that introduction, Phil, and for being our guest, Victor Zverovich.
Hello.
So you get that
Thanks
close?
for inviting. Yes.
So Victor is going to set us right about format, but I think there's a couple of topics we want to talk about first. One of the things that I was pointing out we neglect is we usually like to say the name of the guests on CppCast, and this week's guest was Matthew Butler, although, as Phil pointed out, there's probably been about 4 guests since our last episode. What else is going on in the world? CppCon had a lightning talk announcement. Do you want to talk about that, Phil?
Well, I suppose I could. So Michael Case normally does the lightning talks, so has done for a few years at CppCon and C++ now. And last year in particular, he introduced the lightning challenge format, which was quite well received. But unfortunately, he couldn't make it to
Wait. Let's first talk about what the lightning challenge is.
I was going to get to that.
Oh, okay. You're right. Okay.
Yeah, well, we'll discuss that in a moment because Michael Case couldn't make it to CppCon this year.
We're going to miss him a lot.
Yeah, so there will be no lightning talks.
Oh, no.
Oh, actually, John asked if I could do it. So I will be hosting the lightning talks this year. The lightning challenge will be back. So the lightning challenge is, so lightning talks in general, of course, are usually 5-minute or at least very short talks. So very fast paced. You've got a single point to get across before you get pulled off the stage.
And we take that 5 minutes pretty seriously, a lot more seriously than actually other talks, where if you go over a minute or two, nobody cares. On a lightning talk, you're not going to go over a minute or two. You will get pushed off the stage.
Yeah, although there is one way to do it, and that's to do a lightning challenge.
Oh. So
lightning challenges, you may get up to 8 minutes on stage, but there are points during the talk at which we actually defer to the audience to see whether the speaker should continue. So Michael's format was after 3 minutes, and then again after 6 minutes, I think it was. And then the audience responses are collected via a web app. I'm going to slightly change that this year. It's basically the same, but we're just going to have a single point after 4 minutes. We're actually going to stop the talk, so you have like a build up to make your case for whether you're going to continue or not. And then the audience decides, and then all going well, we'll continue. So like very slight change, but otherwise, yeah, it's going to be a little bit more pressure. So recommend only those that have prior experience of doing lightning talks sign up for that one.
But the audience loves to see you sweat, so so it's a lot of fun for the audience, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I think the audience has historically been fairly generous, right? Most people have gotten to continue.
I am not aware of anyone that hasn't.
Okay.
No, I'm not going to throw around any claims of it being rigged, but we'll see. Now I'm in control.
Lightning talks are very popular, and they should be. They're a lot of fun to give, but also a lot of fun to watch, and the audience gets into it. And so it's for those who haven't attended, it's a lighter fare really than, if you're going to a typical session at CppCon, which is an hour long, we're going to dig in pretty deep. It's going to get pretty serious. If you go to C++ Now, it's 90 minutes long. We're going to do really deep. It's going to be really serious. And the lightning talks, sometimes they're nothing but a goof, right? Sometimes people do them just for fun, but some people have serious points they want to make. It's just a really focused point on one thing, and so it's very serious, but it's short duration. And then some people, as I say, and we embrace that too. It's 5 minutes long. You can have fun with it.
Yeah, and of course, many of them do manage to artfully combine those two elements, so they are both entertaining and informative.
Yes, sometimes there's a real message in there, but we also laugh, which is, everybody loves that. Have you ever given a lightning talk, Victor?
No, only real full-size ones.
Only full-size ones.
Yeah, even then I was kind of.
I think.
trying to speed up the end.
I'm not hearing you.
Am
I
I
think you
breaking
broke
up?
up there, so that's going to be a problem. You did, yes.
No, I think it's too challenging for me to make a lighting talk. Maybe when I get more experience presenting like full-size ones.
That's actually a lot of insight. That's one of the things that Kate Gregory says, is that the shorter talk is actually harder to do, but most people don't realize that. And so that's why we do them, is because we get people to sign up thinking, oh, well, I'd never be able to do a full 60-minute talk, but I can talk for 5 minutes. And then it turns out, no, a short talk really is much harder to do. You're going to put more time into it, certainly more time per minute spent in the talk, getting that honed. Because time is so precious then. So you really work on that one.
Exactly.
So I'm going to edit this whole section out. I don't want to put anyone off signing up for a lightning talk.
But they're no less fun. You absolutely should sign up. It's a lot of fun. So the other announcement we made from CppCon is that the posters have been announced. So if you're interested in that, take a look at that. I'm always anxious to see what the posters are going to be. We will have them up, and people who go to the conference actually get to vote. So we give out little tickets, and then you vote on your best poster. And there's actually millions of dollars in prizes. No. There is some rather insubstantial prize at stake, but mostly it's about bragging rights, I think. So we do want to support the poster program. The other much less exciting news is that our hotel is sold out. So if you're attending CppCon, get your hotel room right away. We have a couple of overflows arranged. We may have to do other overflows as well, because the number of people wanting to stay in the hotel is really much larger than what we had anticipated. And so
So does that mean we've outgrown the venue already?
We have outgrown our block. We ask for a certain number of rooms, and you don't want to be too aggressive with that, because you have to pay for those rooms. Whatever rooms you ask for, you have to pay for. So we didn't want to be too aggressive, and turns out we should have been more aggressive than we were, but we did. I mean, I don't think we would do it any differently with what we knew then, but certainly with what we knew now, we would love to have, another 100 rooms. I think it would come in really handy, but that's where we are. If you're planning to attend, absolutely start making your room reservations right now. Even if you're not in the main hotel, you want to be in the overflow and not. One of the things that we're looking at is for the next overflow. The first overflow we got, not nearly as nice a hotel, but actually less expensive. But it looks like all the other hotels we've talked about have realized that there's a real shortage for those dates, and now they're wanting to get lots of money. So you really, really want to book your hotels really quickly, because there's clearly going to be a shortage of hotels in the area, and the hotel managers are figuring that out and responding appropriately or inappropriately, depending on your point of view. So what else is going on? We got a couple of releases to talk about.
Well, that's actually more conference news to go to.
Oh, of course there is. Yes.
Because I've actually announced the dates for the next C++ on C. The C++ on C 2020 is going to be from the 7th to the 10th of June. So that's quite a bit later than this year. We had it in February.
Right.
That's a deliberate choice on two counts.
Uh-huh.
One was to try and address one of the problems we had was with the weather. Obviously, it's a bit chilly in the UK in February.
And being right on the coast, right on the North Sea.
Yeah.
It's on the channel. It's not on the North Sea, but
yeah. But we knew that going in. What we didn't know was that being quite an old building, the heating system there wasn't really up to it when it got particularly windy that week. So the combination of those three factors was a bit of a problem. So a lot of people were sitting there wearing coats during the sessions, which not really what you want. So we thought that moving it to June would give us a bit more control over the weather, if you like. And the other reason was the specific dates we chose deliberately to immediately follow the WG21 Bulgaria meeting, so the ISO standards meeting, which is not going to be to everyone's taste. Some people would prefer to just relax after a week in WG21, but for some people who are traveling, particularly from the States and other further places from the UK, already being sort of Europe side makes it a bit easier to get to
extend your trip, particularly if they're attending WG21 that may be a good speaker, although getting speakers has not been a problem for you? Didn't you have some astronomical number of submissions for?
Yeah, last time we had 4 times as many submissions as we had slots. So it's not so much the fact that we're short of speakers, but there are certain speakers that we may not be able to get at all otherwise.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to mention any names at this point, but we'll see how that plays out.
But you're excited about a few particular ones.
Yes. Let's see.
All right. And if people book right now, they're guaranteed a hotel room. Is that how it works? You're
no,
not sold out on a
tickets.
hotel yet.
Well, we haven't opened the tickets yet.
Oh.
But yeah, you mentioned hotels. We're actually in the process of trying to book up as many other hotels as possible right now, because we know that obviously being the peak season in a coastal town in the UK, it's going to get quite busy.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to book as many as we can and reserve blocks. And what we don't have is like one big hotel like you do with CppCon that we can just book out a block in. We have to find lots of little hotels that maybe have 10 rooms here, 5 rooms there.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a job,
but it will be on the coast in June. Sounds like it'll be beautiful.
It can be. The UK weather is a bit unpredictable, so it may be torrential downpours, and we've even had snow in June before, but we're not expecting that. But who knows? It'll be exciting to find out.
It will be. It will be. All right. So releases.
Mm-hmm.
A Sea Lion release.
Yes. So I hinted at this last time, which was obviously a few weeks ago now. So since then, we've actually had the release of Sea Lion 2019.2. I spoke a little bit about it then, so I'm not going to go into it too much now, but it's been quite a big release, very well received. I think some of the biggest news has been on the embedded side, actually. We've got, trying to think now, so support for GDB server. All sorts of embedded flavors support that, so it's opened up debugging on a lot of new devices, and also a peripheral view. So embedded devices have different peripherals like LEDs and things like that. They can all show up in their own dedicated view. So it's really filling out to be a really first-class IDE for embedded development. Obviously, it's still just a start. There's going to be more to come. But yeah, I think that's what we'll say for this time.
Which we know, because there's been a lot of work. I mean, it's not. This isn't a product where somebody built the product and then stands back just to keep just to reap the rewards. There's obviously a lot of development going on. It's very active in development, so that's what's kind of cool about it. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
And there's a GCC release 9.2.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about that, Victor? Did you look at that?
Yes, I briefly looked at it, and it looks pretty exciting for me because it has some implementation of some of the upcoming C++20 features, in particular class types and non-type template parameters, and also a minor but very useful feature is constant evaluated, which is useful, for example, if you want to and you can do built-in but built all context per friendly, and so I had some workarounds in my formatting library for that, and this will eventually allow me to get rid of those workarounds and dispatch to the built-in or the naive implementation for context per.
You know, one of the comments you made about just the fact that we are seeing 20 features already, it kind of reflects the reality that we have. I mean, we use the term, at least I think of it this way, is you're programming to C++11 or C++17. But the truth is the compilers are, the compiler teams are putting features in as they can. And so it's very, very seldom that you're actually in a situation where you say, well, we're going to use C++17 exactly. Instead, what you do is you say, well, it turns out that with the compilers we need, this is a set of features that's universally supported, and some of them may be different versions of C++, but we can embrace those, and that is going to be such a moving target. As long as you're updating your compiler, you're going to get more and more features, because there's no compiler team that's sitting back and saying, well, we're not going to implement 20 features until 20 ships. Nobody's doing that. Everybody is scrambling to get as much into their tools as possible, as soon as possible. And so C++ continues to be a moving target. I think the only people who talk specifically about languages about versions, are the committee itself and people who do training, because we have to keep track of it somehow. And so thinking about it in terms of, well, we're going to talk about C++ 17 features. And but people actually writing code are saying, well, yeah, that's not a 17 feature, but it's shipping in the compilers I care about, so I can go ahead and use it now.
Yeah.
And of course, since we last recorded, we've had the Cologne meeting. One of the big news coming out of there was that contracts has been taken out. Not because there's nobody likes the feature, but quite the contrary. Too many people like the feature and have completely different ideas about how that should work. And really, it came to a head in Cologne, and we realized that we're not quite ready as a community to decide exactly what that should look like yet. So a new study group has been formed to debate that, and we should hopefully see the fruits of that in the 23 timeframe. Right,
and I like the approach they're making on this. There was kind of a last minute, and I what I heard, I wasn't there, but that Michael Wong did a clinic on how to do negotiation to try to see, is there a solution that we can navigate that would please the different parties. But what I like is that the way that the study group is approaching this is not to say, okay, well, these are the different designs. How do we put these designs together? No, what they're doing instead is saying, okay, let's go back. What are the use cases we want supported? Let's document what it has to achieve, and then we'll figure out what the syntax is and what the language rules are. And I think that's exactly the way this is the methodology that should have been done more. I give the committee, well, certainly an A for effort. There's a lot of effort that goes into it, but sometimes I think that there's a little bit too much politics and a little bit too much, hey, we like this syntax and we're going to force that to work, without stepping back and saying, what is it we're really trying to achieve, and what are the use cases we need to support? So I really applaud what they do. And I, for one, I know everyone else, well, I should say everyone else, I think a lot of people are just seeing this as a failure. We had a feature that was ready to go in and we pulled it out. That's what a failure. And I have the exact opposite point of view. I say, look, this is a complete success because we had a feature that some people weren't going to like at all, and that's not going to happen. I'm loving that. I think that that being slow about rolling out features, but when they are rolled out, they're what we really want. That's a huge win. And I know there's a lot of people disagree with me. They say, let's get stuff in. We're way behind. We need a lot more features and stuff like that. And I just, the price we pay when we get it wrong is just lots and lots of pain to explain to people why, well, you have to watch this when you do the feature or something like that. Very painful.
So Robert Ramey in the chat says, the less the committee does, the more successful it is.
Well, I don't want the committee to do less. I just want the committee to standardize less. I think that the committee spending a lot of time working on features, that is not wasted time. But I think that when the committee says, well, we've achieved a lot because we've standardized a long list of features, that's the wrong attitude. I think that the committee should be proud of themselves when they say the features that we put in are ironclad, and when described, nobody has to spend a long time saying, well, here's this thing you have to watch out for, and this doesn't work quite the way you expect it to work. And, if we can just say, look, here's this cool feature. Maybe it doesn't do all you'd like it to do, but what it does is solid. That's a victory.
Let's not talk about object initialization again.
There's a few other things. So what else do we want to talk about before we dive into our format discussion?
I did have one article I put up there, but I think that was just in case we had time for it. But
all right, we could circle back to it then. So let's talk about format, or I guess what we should say now, STD format.
Yeah.
So tell us the story of format, Victor.
So you want the story of STD format or the story of the library?
Well, start with the library. What got you interested in this, and why were you not happy with good old C out and streams?
Well, it started surprisingly diagnostics from my parser I was working on, and none of the solutions that I found were convenient enough. So I wrote a little formatting library. I thought it just will take a few days, and basically the first version did. So it allowed you to pass a format string arguments. It was back then it had a terrible API, also similar to iOS streams. It used overloading of insertion operator, but I soon switched to variadic templates. So my main kind of problem was that I wanted to have it local, independent, performant, and preferably so that you could have positional arguments, and so that you could have the whole in one place rather than that's how it started.
And then what got you, how do I say this? What got you considering putting this into the standard? You've proposed this as a standard. It's now been accepted. How did that happen?
Yeah. So the library started in 2012, I think, and I only started thinking about standardization in 2016 when various people were suggesting this idea to me, and I thought maybe it makes sense because it's such a fundamental thing that every programmer should have access to right off the box, rather than pulling in a third-party library, which was fairly well established by that time. So in people want that, and lots of excitement. Wrote the first version of the paper and submitted for Toronto.
And so when was that? That was Toronto was in when?
Toronto was in 2017. Yeah, so it started in 2016, but then I kind of skipped a few meetings because I was in the middle of changing jobs, and so I went to work for Facebook, and which was actually nice because they were now sponsoring my trips to standards committee meeting. I'm not sure if I was able to do that working elsewhere.
Now, the format library is designed to create format strings. You're not actually directly outputting things. You then use cout or something like that to actually do the output. Is that how it works?
Std format, yes. It can give you a std string, or you can write to an output iterator with the format 2, which is somewhat similar to what's called sprintf, I guess, where you can pass a buffer and format there. So, but this is more general. So you can pass any output iterator. In particular, you can pass an ostream iterator, which is probably horribly inefficient, or you can construct a string and pass it to cout.
Right. So it's really focused on not output, but formatting.
Exactly. So I think those are fundamentally different orthogonal features, formatting and which was a bit of a format takes only formatting and does it as good as possible, and you can format into a buffer and then do your low-level I/O on it.
Okay, so give us a bit of a sketch of what the formatting library looks like. You said you had considered, or at least you did earlier, you overloaded the insertion operator. But what does the format library look like now? You said you did want to support positional parameters.
Yeah, so format library, so you have a bunch of functions that take a format string similar to sprintf, but the syntax is borrowed from Python, and a bunch of arguments which I passed using variadic templates, so it's completely type safe. And then you positions, specified string, kind of very much resembles sprintf. It's just how would you design printf nowadays? So it would be type safe, replace var args with variadic templates, should be extensible so that you will be able to format objects of user-defined types, and it should be performant because printf is kind of has this locale by default behavior, and which really impedes performance.
So let me ask you a question. Suppose that I create a format string and I'm formatting something that's going to have 3 numeric values in it, 3 integer values, but
Yeah.
I only pass 2. Do I get a compile time error, or is that a runtime problem?
If you're talking about the std format, is to report at compile time at the moment, but all the underlying design and low-level APIs allow you to process format string at compile time. So in the future, we'll be able to have it reported at compile time. And the FMT library, in fact, implements this feature, although in a somewhat hacky way, so that you need to wrap your format string in a macro, and then it uses context per lambdas and kind of ugly hacks to process it at compile time. With class types and non-time template parameters, the feature GCC 9.2 feature I was talking about actually makes it easier.
Mm-hmm.
So in 23, we'll probably have this.
Okay.
But not in 20.
But it's part of the design path. It's something you're looking at as.
Exactly. Review comments format string checks, and not just checks. So checks is one thing, but actually you can have. Am I breaking up? Someone is complaining.
Yeah, I'm having some difficulty hearing you, but just power through it. I think we'll have to fix it in post, right, Phil?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So basically, checks is only one thing. Another thing is that you can parse the format string at compile time and generate an optimal formatter, so to speak, that can take your arguments and place them efficiently in the output buffer. So that's another possible improvement.
Well, as we speak about improvements and the future, I know from previous interviews that you were not really that strongly motivated to do kind of input, but now you've kind of changed your mind and started to work on some input stuff, right?
To some extent. So, as I told earlier, the whole formatting thing started from me trying to report better diagnostics from a parser. But yeah, I think there is a lot of work to do in formatting. Yeah, so and it's more important in my opinion than the input part. But that said, I did write a sketch of a paper for Cologne, and now I'm collaborating with Elias Gosselin, the author of ScanLib, SCNlib, who kindly agreed to work with me together on this in this area. So hopefully we'll come up with something by maybe for 23 if the committee is happy with our approach.
Well, that's a real challenge. I mean, there's security implications, there's lots of performance issues, but it's as important. It might be that it's actually used a little less because just about every program is going to do some output, but a lot of times programs have their own particular way of doing input, so they don't need this. But it is, and it's hard. It's hard. Let's say this: it's hard to get it right. if you're willing to just kind of ignore the errors, then it's pretty easy to write it. But to get it really right, it's hard. It's really hard. And particularly, it's hard enough just writing an input library that accepts that there might be bad input from careless users. But when you start to say, well, what if it's actually a malicious user? What if it's not carelessness? What if someone is actually deliberately trying to give you the worst possible input to break your app? That's what's terrifying, because that's really hard to get right. No pressure on you, though, Victor.
We're going to have to stop you talking again, John.
What's that?
So you broke up there, Victor.
No, I was saying that I absolutely agree with John. And one thing that is not appreciated by the kind of the design of scanf is that formatting and parsing is inherently asymmetric, and so scanf tries to kind of hide this difference. And so we need to think how to do the error reporting and how to handle kind of malicious input and all these things, and how to do all of this performantly. I totally agree with John.
Yeah, I think deceptively it seems like it should be symmetric, but no, it's a completely different animal with completely different issues. Very much so.
Yeah.
So what's the direction you're taking on this?
And,
I said, what is the direction you're taking? You said you have written or you are writing a paper.
So I wrote a sketch of a paper kind of to outline some of the ideas. So I was looking at the scanf approach and what if we do the same for scanf as we did for AsprintF with the format. And there are some good features of that, but error handling is one of the things. And how do you return the outputs? All these details need more thoughts. So I hope to collaborate with Elias on that, because he has an implementation experience. Yeah, we'll see.
So not a slam dunk for 23, even though we have what seems like plenty of time.
No.
Okay, all right. So what other kinds of features? You say that Facebook is now supporting you to go to meetings. I assume you're not working only on format. What other things are interesting that you've been working on?
Yeah, I'm definitely working not only on format. That's my hobby project. So Facebook allows me to spend a few weeks at standard committee meetings, but otherwise my full job is completely my day job is completely unrelated. I work on an RPC and serialization framework called Thrift. Maybe you've heard of it, the Facebook variety, because apparently there are several of those. I only started relatively recently, half a year ago. But yeah, that's a fun project, and there is also a parsing and serialization aspects in it, which is near and dear to me.
Just for internal RPC use, yeah, right. You have to marshal the arguments and then parse them on the other end.
Yeah, so it's basically for communicating between services. It's not internal, it's actually an open source project. There are two open source projects. There is Apache Thrift, which Facebook originally open sourced, and I'm working on the second iteration of that called FB Thrift, which is available on GitHub.
Yeah, we did look at using that for my my last project. And of course, we ended up writing our own.
A true C++ programmer. Let's look at what's available and then decide to write our own.
Yeah. Maybe we should standardize an RPC framework.
Well, that would certainly be an undertaking, and would be appreciated if you could get to it. I think you'd find it challenging, but maybe not. Maybe it can be based on the direction we're going with ASIO.
Or reflection. I think reflection would play a big role. Compile time reflection would play a big role in a serialization framework.
Yeah, that makes, yeah, I hadn't even thought about it that way, but yeah, I was thinking more of the networking side, but you're right. The reflection stuff that's coming. I don't know how much reflection stuff is in 20, but I know that there's some really ambitious ideas for what we want to go. And I think it's, well, it's my conservative bias, but I think it makes more sense to get it right than to start putting some things in that we hope are right. So
yeah, reflection would be really useful for that, because you could, instead of having a separate IDL language, you could express everything in C++ and then generate bindings and serialization code for other languages. So it's one code generator less, and one of the most difficult ones.
Which is actually what we ended up doing in my previous role, albeit with macros.
Doesn't that sound like fun?
Yeah.
No.
Actually, what I was asking about earlier was not really your work at Facebook, although that's interesting. What I was wondering is, what are you working on the committee that's not framework? Or format? Is format take up all your committee time, or do you get a chance to look at other features and what's interesting that you've been working on?
Well, format took most of my committee time, especially during the last few meetings, because it was close to C++20 and I really wanted to make the deadline. It wouldn't even happen if not for all the telecon that Marshall Glow, the chair of library working group, organized. Yeah, so it did take most of my work. I've been paying attention about some Unicode stuff, and the low-level I/O library looks pretty interesting. I was wondering if we can somehow integrate. It's more thought, but yeah, Unicode is super important, and I hope in 23 we'll have better support for it, and some way to output UTF-8 strings and format them as well. Because for now we just punted on Unicode and 420, which is sad. But
yeah. In the format library, it's not supported.
In the library, it is supported to some extent. So yeah, although more work is needed, because right now you cannot, for example, specify a multi-byte fill character. So it should, right now it's just one code point. I started working on it, but
I think I lost you there.
Breaking up?
Yeah, I think I lost you there. But
what was the last part?
Well, I think you said that you could only take one code point and you couldn't take multi-byte, which confused me because I thought that some code points were already multi-byte.
Oh, sorry, code units. I meant code units. Yeah. So I'm working on supporting like arbitrary code points and possibly even graphene clusters, but that's kind of maybe too challenging. Even Python works on code point level.
You were inspired by the Python format. Is that because you've done a lot of Python, or was it just you were looking around and found that?
I can't say that I've been doing a lot of Python, but it's my go-to scripting language, and I like the way from printf and did it right modern. So I took it as an example and adapted for C++, which was a very easy thing to do, surprisingly. So in the process, some of the more dynamic features of the formatting language were lost. For example, you cannot just specify nested format specifiers everywhere. You can just have dynamic width or dynamic precision. That's it. Because otherwise the performance would be polling. In Python, they don't care about performance. They can just make things nice for the user. But for C++, we cannot have that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's an awful lot of good ideas that went into Python. And it had kind of a good overall philosophy. Things like explicit is better than implicit, which I think that we are learning the hard way in C++. I think we're kind of coming around to that, but there's a number of things where I think Python got it right. Don't tell anybody, but most of the code that runs CppCon is written in Python. Because it might be embarrassing.
The secret's safe with us.
Okay, all right.
Should we merge with PyCon?
Oh my goodness. PyCon has kind of been, I've never been to PyCon. I don't know that much about it, but I've kind of watched it from afar with the idea that when we started CppCon, I looked at PyCon and I said, if they can be that size, then we can also be that size. So that has been we have grown every year. And when you project growth out like this, you always get scared and say, well, what if this is the year that we've hit the max and we're not going to grow very much now? I have conversations with people, including, kind of what our Herb, who has said a number of times, he said, PyCon is big enough, or CppCon is big enough. If it doesn't grow, I'm okay with that. And I'm a little, no, I think it should be much bigger. I'm happy that, he's not opposed to growing, but he's always like, okay, no, this is big. And I say, well, we grew 30% on our early bird registrations, or 30% ahead of last year. And he said, what? I think that the last I looked at PyCon, it's like 3,500 people. And so we're at like a little more than 1,500 probably this year. So we've got a lot of, I think we're a long way from maxing out our growth. We're still growing pretty fast. And before we stop growing, we're going to slow down, and we haven't shown any signs of slowing down yet. So, but no, I look at PyCon and see that as essentially, if they can be there, then we can get there eventually. They have a 10-year head start. PyCon is a long established conference, and we are still, I don't know what to say. We've done one location move, or we're in the middle of doing a location move. So I think we're kind of beyond being a child. Maybe we're in our adolescence now. We're not really fully mature conference, I think, in some ways, but still hitting growth spurts occasionally.
And this is taken into account. There are so many other C++ conferences out there nowadays. You see announcements all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I know one or two.
Yes, there certainly are a lot of conferences, and I want to support that. On the one hand, yeah, it's a little scary to know that I'm competing with a lot of conferences for speakers and attendees, and we just can't scale up. Most programmers don't have an infinite budget for the amount of time they can spend it. It's not money that's the problem; it's time. And particularly if they're on the committee and they're already spending 3 weeks at committee time, and then they go to the boss and say, I'd like to attend 2 or 3 other conferences. And that's not a popular request. So yeah, but on the other hand, I like the idea that there are regional conferences. People, people don't have to feel like they're going to the big scary conference. Instead, they go to their local conference that's close, and maybe know some people who are attending that and feel more comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm.
There's room for that too. So, there's so much. The committee is working so fast, and even if the committee stood still, which they're not going to, we still have lots of stuff to talk to people about, best practices. There's a lot of room for education that's not being fulfilled. So there's lots and lots of stuff that conferences can do, and we need to get lots more people talking and listening to each other, and to up our game in total.
So I hope I'll see submissions from both of you to C++ on C.
Possibly.
So June's an interesting time. I'll have to think about that because that's going to be after C++ now, and maybe it's far enough after that I could actually have catch my breath.
Tony
I'm not sure.
Tony Van Erd on a chat today said, so it's going to be C++ now, breathe, then C++ on C. And then somebody else pointed out that actually there's a WG21 meeting in the middle as well. So it's C++ now, breathe, WG21, then C++ on C.
Well, no, I don't know if ACCU has announced their dates yet, but they're usually April. Yeah. So it's going to be ACCU, breathe, C++ now, breathe.
You're forgetting C++ Russia.
Which one? There's two of them now.
Moscow.
Moscow is in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
And when is it?
Shortly. This year it was a couple of weeks after ACCU. Then a few weeks later we have Core C++. I'm not sure when they're going to be next year.
Yeah. So
I wonder if you can continuously go from one C++ event to another. Maybe if you count user group meetings.
If you count WG21 meetings and user group meetings, yeah, there's something really interesting going on almost all year long. And when you look from say April to September even, but April, May, June, there's a lot of stuff going on in there. So you definitely could just take those 3 months off and just go to conferences.
So I don't remember how we got onto this digression, but I think it was originally talking about Python. And I had a little point to make on that, which was I was reading a Reddit thread today on std format. And somebody commented that finally C++ is getting Python formatting. And there seems to be a lot of support for that idea. And I've heard that before as well, that's the way people seem to be thinking of it, which is a compliment, I think.
I think that it's wrong to think that just because a feature is successful in a language, it can be grafted into C++. But it's also wrong to think that C++ has to invent everything from scratch. We should be aggressively stealing from other languages. We have to make it work in C++. We have to decide on the kinds of things we want to steal. But we shouldn't be too proud to say, Python got this right. I think a lot of the things that Python got right, they got right because they looked at C++ and saw that C++ didn't do it as well and that there's room for improvement. And so I think stealing back is it's good for users. I feel that way about conferences. Some of the great stuff at CppCon is an idea that I stole from Jens or ACCU or somebody else. It's like, yeah, that works there. Let's steal that idea. and by the same token, I'm happy to have other conferences steal our good ideas. So, it's just for the best of the user. It always is. And being too proud and saying, well, we're not going to do it that way because everybody else does it that way, or somebody else does it that way, or that idea is associated with another language or conference or whatever. That's just the wrong attitude. The right attitude is, if that works for our users and or attendees, then we will steal that idea. Now you have to integrate it. You have to make it part of. You have to make it work in your environment, whether that's a conference or a language. I think this analogy may be stretched too far. I don't know, but but I see it that way. We were going to talk about this article. 17 smaller but handy C++ 17 features. This is almost a theme. There's a talk at CppCon on smaller 17 feet. I think there's a lot of richness in 17, and people are it's not the big feature. It's all these little tiny things that make it so nice.
It's ironic, really, because when 17 was at the same stage that we're at now with 20, there was this sort of collective sigh that all those big features we've been hoping for didn't make it into 17. There's going to be nothing left. It's going to be such a minor release. And then we realized there were actually quite a few big features in it after all, and it was a big release. And now we're finding that they were shielding even more minor things that made it in. They're also really nice. So it's like multi-stage discovery that we're having. Just how good C++ 17 is.
there are features that look minor, but then when library implementers start implementing them, they kind of start regretting it. For example, from chars to chars requires a ton of work, and it's the specification is very simple. So.
Which one is this? You said
from chars
you said.
to chars.
Oh,
here it mentions from chars, but to chars is important.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing some progress stuff on that. That's it. Some of the stuff that's easy to specify is very hard to implement.
But also very important because before from chars to chars, we didn't have a good round trip shortest floating point representation, which is a shame. And also having that, I was able to still define std format in terms of two chars, which was nice.
Made that an easier specification because
exactly.
that work is already done for you. Great. So are there particular features you wanted to call out of this, Phil?
I mean, I will admit I haven't actually read the whole article. I just skimmed through it. It's really sounded interesting, and it's from an author who tends to write good stuff, Bartek. Filipek. But a couple there struck me, like the dynamic memory allocation for over-aligned data. It's actually the first one in the list. But when you need that, that's huge because it's not really something you can easily do otherwise. Another gem is the std void t transformation trait, which off the top of my head, I can't even remember now exactly when it's useful, but it's another one of those things where when you need it, you think, right, that's exactly what I need. And it seems like magic.
Yeah, I think every project has an implementation of that. It's one-liner or two-liner.
Yeah. So having it as a vocabulary type is really good, I think. And then the GCD, LCM, and clamp methods. Again, so this simple bread and butter stuff that's just really nice just having the standard.
Right.
Not necessarily very clever.
I know because I've done it in a class environment, explaining what clamp is hard to do. And yet once you get it, it's just such an obvious thing. Yeah. But it's I don't know what to say. It sounds like it would be easy to explain, and when you try to explain it, it's harder. It's hard to just put it in a few words.
So perhaps you could explain what it is then.
Oh, great. So clamp takes a value and two limits, and the idea is that it will return the value you passed in as long as it's within those limits. If it is not, it will return the limit that it exceeds. Does that make any sense?
Yep.
It's, as I said,
the nearest limit.
Well, yeah, I guess the limit. Yeah, the nearest limit. Yeah. It's, as I said, it's once you understand it and you say, oh, I've needed that. I have a form where we do this input, and you can input any value you want, but if it's greater than this or less than this, we can't accept it, and so we have to clamp it to that value. And so, yeah, clamp is a cool tool. Let's see, what other things does he have on here? I don't even know about the sampling algorithms. What is sample? Is that simply taking selects n elements from a sequence, the random selection? Yeah, that is kind of cool.
I didn't know that one.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that before. So yeah, I am going to have to take some time and read through this list. As you point out, these are not huge things. These are small things, but they are things that that will come up repeatedly over time. And rather than write them yourself and maybe get them wrong, it's nice to have something that's documented, implemented, tested, specified, all those kinds of things.
I'm excited about removed features.
Sorry, insert or assign. Oh yeah, auto pointer finally gone.
Yeah.
I think we should remove more stuff from the standard. because it's getting too big, and there is so much deprecated and or kind of obsolete
Auto
stuff in
pointer
there.
being removed actually caused a problem for me in Catch. Before we went to Catch 2, and I still had to support C++98, we either had auto pointer, but we didn't have unique pointer yet, or we had unique pointer, but we didn't have auto pointer. So I ended up having to create a macro to shift the file to one or the other, depending on the standard version.
Why macro and not a type ls?
Because I had to support C++98.
Oh, yeah, I guess.
Yes, how soon we forget.
Yes. So is it Vittorio who has proposed this the idea of epochs so that you can essentially turn on and off language flavors in your source code and say, I think that that's the kind of thing that sounds really attractive until you start to get into the details, and then you realize, oh my God.
Yeah, epochs, I think was his term.
Epochs, yes.
Yeah. And I do think that we are going to need something like that. Maybe not right now, although it would be useful, but I think at some point it's going to become inevitable. Because we're not deprecating stuff fast enough. We can't because of the backward compatibility requirements. So we're going to need some way of having our cake and eating it.
Yeah. I don't know how to do it. Particularly when you have a situation where you're using templates, which is essentially, take this code and put it right here. And okay, so which language are we talking about then when you do that? Is it the language that the template was written in, or is it the language where the template is being, inserted? And maybe there's a clear answer to that. I don't know what it is, but maybe there is. Maybe you say, no, wherever the template was written, we're going to follow the language rules there. And when you instantiate a template, you're instantiating that template under the language rules that the template was written in. Maybe it's not a problem, but it's the kind of thing that makes me think, have we really thought this one through carefully? Because that's going to be what the challenge is. And of course, when you have macros, that's going to be,
Well, presumably macros wouldn't be allowed in the new version of the language.
That's right. That's the language that both we all want and we all fear. Suddenly I can't use macros anymore. I feel like macros have this very, very long tail. There's the really common use of macros, and the language has taken care of that. So, it used to be, basically they were used as constants. Well, now we have constants. Then they were used as inline functions. Well, we have inline functions, So the main uses of macros have gone away. And we've finally gotten rid of include. Well, we shouldn't say we've gotten rid of it, but we now have a language version of include where we have modules, so we don't need include anymore. But there are dozens and dozens and dozens of uses of macros. And to try to introduce a feature in the language that makes this particular use of macros obsolete is, I think, doing more damage to the language than it's worth. I think we just have to say, look, we discourage people from using macros, but here's a list of 40 different situations where you might want to use macros, none of which any one situation is important or interesting, but they won't ever go away. At least I can't imagine a situation where somebody could make the case and say, okay, that was the last use case you ever need for macros. You don't need to use macros anymore. I just don't buy it. I've used macros for bizarre things at one time or another, and I hate macros, but it's like, okay, well, there's no choice. Either I'm going to repeat myself in a really painful and ugly way, or I'm going to use a macro here. And I hate to repeat myself too. So, yeah.
I can imagine the title of the blog post or talk announcing it now. The last macro. I look forward to that.
Yeah. I want to thank you for being on, Victor. I'm sorry about the connectivity issues. We'll look forward to what Phil can do to patch over those in post edit.
Oh, we should be fine in the edit because we'll have the locally recorded audio.
Right. Okay. But thanks for that, and thanks for our live audience commenting on our adventures here. And I guess it's it's time for us to wish everyone safe coding. And if you listen to CppCast, then you can listen to Matthew talk about secure coding as well. So safe coding, everybody.
So coding.
Safe coding.